There are restaurants in this city where the waiting list is longer than most people's engagements, where the sommelier earns more than most lawyers, and where a table by the window is considered a social credential. Harlow's was that kind of place. It occupied the ground floor of a converted Gilded Age bank in the financial district, all original limestone columns and vaulted ceilings that had been softened, over decades, into something warm rather than imposing. The bar was hewn from a single slab of walnut. The flatware was heavier than it had any right to be, and the staff, every single one of them, had been selected not merely for competence, but for a particular quality that the owner, a quiet Frenchman named Beaumont, called presence under pressure. He could never quite explain what he meant by that, but he knew it when he saw it, and he had seen it the moment Lena Vasquez walked through his service entrance 4 years ago, 26 years old, her résumé printed on paper that had been folded one too many times in a bag that had seen better days. She had been 3 semesters from finishing her biochemistry doctorate at Johns Hopkins when her mother's diagnosis came through. Stage 3, the kind of news that doesn't arrive slowly. It arrives all at once, like a wall of water, and afterward you are simply standing in the aftermath, rearranging what remains into something livable. Her mother had no savings to speak of. Her father had been out of the picture since Lena was 9. The insurance covered a fraction. The hospital did not negotiate. So Lena had taken a leave of absence that both she and her advisor understood was permanent, packed 2 suitcases, moved back to the city, and started waiting tables. Not because she had no other options, because this was the fastest, most reliable way to put cash in her mother's account by Thursday. Beaumont had hired her on the spot, not out of charity, because in the 45 seconds it took her to describe her situation, she had used precise language, maintained steady eye contact, and when he asked her, almost as an afterthought, what she knew about wine, she had described the difference between a Burgundy and a Bordeaux in a single sentence that was accurate and unpretentious, and somehow also funny. He had never met a biochemist who could do that. 4 years later, Lena knew the menu the way she used to know molecular pathways, not just the what, but the why. She could tell a table of tourists from a table of regulars within 30 seconds of seating them. She could read the particular silence that meant a couple was fighting versus the silence that meant they were comfortable enough to not need words. She remembered names, not because she had trained herself to, because she actually paid attention, which, she had come to understand, was rarer than any skill on a resume. She also knew, from long experience, which kind of guest was going to be trouble before they had finished sitting down. It was a Tuesday in March, which was the cruelest month for restaurants. Too cold for the patio, too late for Valentine's weekend, too early for spring. The dining room was 3/4 full, table 12. A corner booth that Beaumont reserved for guests he considered worth the real estate had been set for a party of 4 and occupied by 3. The man who arrived first was in his early 50s, broad-shouldered, wearing a blazer that probably cost more than Lena's monthly rent. His name was Owen Rutherford, and if you followed the business press, which Lena did not, particularly, though she read enough to recognize faces, you would know him as the founder and CEO of a private equity firm that had, over the past decade, acquired and restructured a significant portion of the American hospital supply chain. He had been on the cover of 3 magazines. He had testified before a Senate subcommittee. He was, by any conventional measure, an important man, and he carried himself in the manner of someone who had been told so often enough that he had simply accepted it as physics. He arrived with 2 associates, both men, both younger, both wearing the particular expression of people who have learned to laugh a half second before their boss finishes a sentence. Lena greeted them with the standard courtesies. "Welcome back, allow me to take your coats, sparkling or still," and registered, without expression, the way Rutherford looked through her rather than at her when he answered. It was a specific kind of invisibility she had grown fluent in, not hostility. Indifference, the assumption that she was a function rather than a person. A very nice function in a very nice restaurant, but a function nonetheless. She brought the water. She recited the evening's specials with the precision she brought to everything, noting the provenance of the halibut and the particular characteristics of the truffle preparation without making it sound like a lecture. Rutherford's associates nodded and asked one or two polite questions. Rutherford himself was looking at his phone. "I'll need a moment," he said, without looking up. "Of course," Lena said. "Take all the time you need." She moved to the adjacent table, refilled a glass, exchanged a few words with the couple at 7, who were on their 3rd anniversary dinner and always ordered the same thing, and watched, in her peripheral vision, as a 4th person was shown to table 12. She was not what Lena had expected. The woman was perhaps 60, small-framed in the way that reads as deliberate rather than slight, with silver hair cut close and the kind of posture that doesn't come from yoga but from decades of walking into rooms first. She wore a charcoal blazer, no jewelry except small gold earrings, and she moved with an economy of motion that Lena associated with people who had nothing left to prove. She shook Rutherford's hand rather than offering her cheek, which said something. She sat down without waiting to be shown to her seat, which said something else. Lena had not been introduced to her by name. She didn't need to be. She recognized Maren Cole the way you recognize someone whose photograph you've seen in the context of something consequential. Not celebrity, exactly, but significance. Maren Cole was the managing director of a healthcare infrastructure fund with roughly $14 billion under management. She sat on 3 hospital boards. She had, over the past 18 months, been publicly negotiating a major acquisition that the financial press had been covering with the breathless enthusiasm usually reserved for sports. She was also, Lena noted, assessing the room the way Lena assessed it, quietly, completely, taking in every detail with a gaze that was pleasant enough on the surface and absolutely nothing like passive underneath. Lena approached. "Good evening. I'm Lena, and I'll be taking care of you tonight." She addressed the table collectively, and then, naturally, included Cole. "Can I get you something to start while you look over the menu?" "Club soda," Cole said. Then, as if the afterthought were not an afterthought at all, "Thank you, Lena." Rutherford's eyes, which had been on Cole since she sat down, slid briefly to Lena and back. "We'll do a bottle of the Screaming Eagle," he said. "If you have it." "We do," Lena said. "The 2018. I'll bring it for your approval." "Don't bother," Rutherford said. "Just open it." Lena nodded and turned toward the bar. She heard him speak again before she was 3 steps away. Not to her. The table. To the table, but in the particular volume of a man who doesn't modulate based on who's listening. "Service here used to be better," he said. "You had to actually know somebody." Neither of his associates said anything. Cole appeared to be reading the menu. Lena brought the wine. She presented the bottle, opened it with the quiet efficiency that came from 4 years of doing exactly this, and poured a taste for Rutherford, who swirled it, sipped it, and nodded without comment. She poured for the table and stepped back. "Are you ready to order, or would you like a few more minutes?" "I have a question," Rutherford said. "Of course. The duck. It says the sauce is a gastrique." He set down the menu. "Do you know what that is?" It was not a question, it was a test. The kind that announces itself. A small theatrical calibration of the social order, the sort of move that only works if the other person doesn't know they're being tested. Rutherford's associates had gone very slightly still. Cole was still reading the menu. A gastrique is a sweet and sour reduction, Lena said, typically made with sugar caramelized and then deglazed with vinegar, in our case a champagne vinegar, then reduced with a fruit component. Tonight's uses blood orange. The acidity cuts through the fat of the duck and gives the dish its brightness at the finish. Rutherford blinked, just once. Then he smiled, the smile of someone recalibrating. He said. Wood ordered the duck. His associates ordered. Cole ordered the halibut and, when Lena mentioned the wine pairing, asked a brief and intelligent question about the acidity of the chablis they were pouring by the glass. Lena answered it. Cole nodded slowly, the nod of someone filing information rather than simply receiving it. The dinner proceeded. Lena attended the table with the rhythm she applied to all her tables present, without hovering attentive, without being obsequious. She noticed that Rutherford's manner with Cole was different than his manner with his associates. He was performing. Not for them. For her. The slightly louder voice, the anecdotes that circled back to his own judgment being proven correct, the particular way he leaned back in his chair as if the world were arranged for his comfort. All of it was calibrated for an audience of one. Cole listened, agreed occasionally, asked once a sharp question about third-quarter projections that caused Rutherford to talk for 4 minutes without quite answering it. When Lena came to clear the main course plates, Rutherford was mid-sentence on a story about a golf trip to Scotland. She worked quietly and efficiently, and she was reaching for Cole's plate when Rutherford said something that made her go still for exactly 1 second before she continued moving. He had said it in Mandarin. Not to her. Ostensibly to the table, but directed at her in the way that a remark made at the right angle and volume is always directed at whoever it is meant to land on. It was a phrase, 3 or 4 words, and his associates both laughed, the trained laugh, the half-second early, the kind of laugh that doesn't know what it's laughing at. Lena set the plate on her tray, straightened, and looked at Rutherford with an expression that was entirely neutral. Then she answered him, in Mandarin. Not a translation of what he'd said, a response, a complete, grammatically appropriate response that addressed what he had actually meant, which was that a waitress who couldn't tell a gastrique from a gravy had gotten lucky with one question and shouldn't get too comfortable with herself. What Lena said, in the flat Beijing-inflected Mandarin she had picked up during 2 summers of research collaboration at Peking University, was, most people who ask that kind of question are hoping the answer is silence. The table went very quiet. Rutherford's face did the thing faces do when the expected outcome fails to arrive and the brain takes a moment to catch up. His associates looked at each other. They were not laughing now. Cole looked up from her wine glass. She looked at Lena with the direct, quiet attention of someone who has just seen something they were not expecting to see and has decided that it is, in fact, interesting. "I'll bring the dessert menus," Lena said in English, and withdrew. At the service station, her colleague Marcus, who had been watching from 3 feet away and had the good sense to wait until Lena was well clear before saying anything, leaned in and said quietly, "Did you just—" "Yes," Lena said. "Where did you?" "Research collaboration. 2 summers." Marcus looked at her for a moment. "You are genuinely terrifying. I'm going to check on 7, Lena said. She was at table 7 for approximately 2 minutes, confirming that yes, they would like to see the dessert menu, and yes, a birthday cake could be arranged, when, she was aware, without looking directly, that Cole had excused herself from the table and was walking in the direction of the restrooms, which happened to take her past the service station, where Lena was now standing. Cole stopped. She did not make a production of it. stopped, the way people stop when they have decided something. That was Mandarin, she said. Yes, Lena said, business Mandarin, or research Mandarin, mostly. 2 years of coursework, 2 summers in Beijing. My lab had a collaboration with a team at PKU working on enzyme inhibition pathways. She paused. I also have functional French and medical Spanish. The Spanish came first. My mother's primary care team preferred it. Cole was quiet for a moment. The restaurant noise continued around them, pleasant and removed. What's your background? Cole asked, not rudely, with the directness of someone for whom small talk is simply less interesting than information. Lena told not everything, the relevant parts. Johns Hopkins, biochemistry doctoral program, 3 semesters from completion. Her mother's diagnosis, the leave of absence, the decision to be honest with herself about what leaving had actually meant versus what she was still telling herself it meant someday. Cole listened with the same quality of attention she had brought to Rutherford's 4th quarter numbers, which was to say, total, and not particularly impressed by things that were meant to impress. What was your dissertation on? Cole asked. Protein folding errors in early-stage pancreatic cell mutation, specifically the mechanism by which certain inhibitors could interrupt the misfolding cascade before malignant differentiation. A pause. That's a narrow field, Cole said. It's a lethal cancer, Lena said. Narrow felt appropriate. Something shifted very slightly in Cole's expression. Not softness, exactly. Recognition. How long have you been here? 4 years. Full time? Yes. Why Harlow's? It pays reliably. The management is honest. And the clientele? Lena paused, considered, chose honesty. The clientele keeps me from getting bored. Cole's mouth moved in the way that was not quite a smile, but was adjacent to one. What would you need, Cole said, to finish your dissertation? Lena was quiet for 3 seconds. She had not been asked that question before. She had asked it of herself, in the particular 2 a.m., accounting that she did periodically, but no one had asked her. 12 to 15 months, she said. Access to a research environment. My advisor is still at Hopkins. I've kept the relationship current, and my mother's last scan was clear, but her maintenance protocol runs for another 8 months, so I'd need to remain in the city or have the flexibility to return. Cole looked at her with the particular expression of someone converting abstract information into concrete possibility. My fund has a research partnership with 3 healthcare systems, she said. We have a fellowship program for researchers in applied medical science. It's not academic, it's industry-facing, but it carries a stipend, lab access through our institutional partners, and schedule flexibility by design, because most of the fellows are managing other obligations. She paused. I'm telling you this because the fellowship has 2 open slots for the fall cycle, and I have been singularly underwhelmed by the applicant pool. Lena looked at her. The application closes in 6 weeks, Cole added. The written component is significant. You would need to produce something that demonstrates you can translate molecular-level research into language that a board of non-scientists can use to make capital allocation decisions. Like a gastrique, Lena said. Cole looked at her, taking something technical and rendering it precisely without losing the meaning, Lena said, in language the other person can actually use. A pause, and then Cole did smile. Brief, genuine, the smile of someone who doesn't do it often, and therefore does it honestly. Yes, she said, exactly like that. She continued toward the restrooms. Lena stood at the service station for one more moment, then squared her shoulders, picked up her tray, and went back to work. She cleared table 9. She checked in on 11. She brought the birthday cake to table 7, with the low flame and the appropriate discretion, and stood back while the couple sang quietly to each other, the woman's eyes bright in the way eyes get when a moment is exactly what it was supposed to be. When she returned to table 12 with the dessert menus, Cole was back in her seat. Rutherford was explaining something about leverage ratios. Neither of his associates looked especially engaged. Lena distributed the menus without comment. Rutherford ordered the chocolate soufflé, and then, as an afterthought, or perhaps not as an afterthought, said, "I have to ask, where did you learn to speak like that? Like what?" Lena said, "Mandarin." "Like that?" "Research," she said. "I spent some time in Beijing." "For what?" "Biochemistry." Rutherford looked at her for the first time that evening, really looked the way you look at something you had previously categorized and now realize you may have placed in the wrong drawer. It was not a comfortable look for him. You could see the discomfort the way you can sometimes see weather coming across a flat landscape. "You're a scientist?" he said. "I was studying to be," Lena said. "Things came up." "What kind of things?" She held his gaze for just a moment. "Medical bills," she said. The table was quiet. One of his associates picked up his water glass and set it back down without drinking. Rutherford said nothing. There was nothing, really, to say. "I'll put your soufflé in now," Lena said. "It takes about 15 minutes. Can I bring anything in the meantime?" Cole ordered a second club soda. Rutherford shook his head. Lena went to the kitchen. Beaumont was at the pass, reviewing a plate with the focused displeasure he brought to anything that was 90% correct. He looked up when Lena came in. "Table 12, she said. "Soufflé for one, plus the soda." He nodded, turned back to the plate. "Beaumont," she said. He looked up again. "If someone from outside asked you to describe my work here, what would you say?" He considered this question with the seriousness he brought to all questions he considered worth his time. "I would say," he said slowly, "that you are the best reader of rooms I have encountered in 30 years, and that you have wasted approximately nothing of your time here, which is more than I can say for most of my staff and, frankly, most of my guests." She looked at him. "Why?" he said. "No reason," she said. "Soufflé in 15. She pushed through the kitchen door and went back to work. The check for table 12 came to just over $4,000. Rutherford paid it without looking at the total, which was, Lena had come to understand, its own kind of statement, not generosity, but indifference to amounts that would reshape most people's months. He left a 20% tip, which was correct, and said nothing. Cole left a separate bill on the table, placed beneath the edge of the bread plate. Lena found it while clearing. It was a business card, unadorned except for a name, a title, and a handwritten note on the back, application portal below. "I would encourage you not to wait the full 6 weeks." Lena looked at the card for a moment. She slid it into the pocket of her apron, where she kept her pen and her order pad, and, usually, nothing else. She cleared the rest of the table. She reset it for the next reservation. She delivered the last round of drinks to table 8, checked in on the bar seating, and confirmed with the kitchen that the 9:45 covers were on schedule. At the end of service, she sat in the break room with her shoes off and a glass of water and the business card on the table in front of her, and she thought about enzyme inhibition pathways and protein misfolding cascaders and the particular quality of light in a research lab at 6 in the morning. When you've been there since the previous afternoon and the data is starting to say something you didn't expect. She had not let herself think about it in a long time. It was easier not to. The distance between where she had been and where she was had seemed, for 4 years, like a fact of the landscape rather than a gap that could be crossed. She turned the card over. Read the note again. Then she took out her phone, found the application portal, and started reading. The form was substantial. The written components were serious. One of them asked applicants to describe a research problem in language accessible to a general audience without sacrificing technical accuracy. Lena read the prompt twice, thought about gastrique, and smiled despite herself. She did not fill out the form that night. She was too tired, and she knew better than to start something important on tired. But she bookmarked the portal and set a reminder. 6 weeks was enough time. She had written a dissertation chapter in 3 weeks, once on 4 hours of sleep a night, because the data had demanded it. She could write a fellowship application. She put her shoes back on, gathered her things, and walked out through the service exit into the March night, which was cold and smelled faintly of the river, the way the city sometimes did when the wind was right. Above the buildings, a few stars were visible in the gaps between clouds. Not many, just enough to confirm they were still there.